Welcome back to the Cheating Tales Lab. First of all, a huge thank you for helping us reach 5,000 subscribers. Thank you all for your amazing support. To celebrate, we're launching our second channel, Infidelity Tales Lab, where you'll get one-day early access to all our stories plus exclusive, original cheating wife stories you won't find anywhere else. You can subscribe now by clicking the link in the description or the pinned comment, or simply search for Infidelity Tales Lab on YouTube. Don't miss out. Subscribe and listen to exclusive cheating wife stories. You won't regret subscribing. Now let's begin the story. The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital buzzed softly as Dr. Stanley Huang made his final rounds. His footsteps echoed through the quiet pediatric ward, a stark contrast to the chaos of the day. He paused at the nurse's station, reviewing charts one last time before heading home. "Good night, Dr. Huang," Nurse Chun called out. "You did amazing work today with little Tommy's surgery." Stanley nodded, a tired smile on his face. "Thank you, Chun. It's a team effort, as always." As he walked towards the elevator, Stanley's mind drifted to his plans for the evening. A quiet dinner with his wife Sherry, perhaps a movie with their son Zachary. Simple pleasures after a long day of saving lives. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and Stanley stepped inside. Just as the doors began to close, his phone rang. Glancing at the screen, he saw Zachary's name and answered immediately. "Zach, is everything okay?" Stanley asked, concern creeping into his voice. It was unusual for his son to call this late. "Dad," Zachary's voice cracked, heavy with emotion. "You need to come home. Now." Stanley's grip on the phone tightened. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "It's Mom," Zachary choked out. She's at the Starlight Motel with Uncle Paul. I can't believe what I saw. They're doing nasty things openly. I'm sending you the video." The world seemed to tilt beneath Stanley's feet. He leaned against the elevator wall, struggling to process what he'd just heard. His wife and his own brother? It couldn't be true. "Zachary, are you sure?" Stanley managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. "I wish I wasn't, Dad. But you need to see this." Stanley's phone buzzed with an incoming message. With trembling fingers, he opened the video file. The grainy footage showed a familiar hallway, clearly in a cheap motel. Then, unmistakably, Sherry appeared, giggling as she fumbled with the room key. Paul followed close behind, his hands all over her. Stanley's stomach lurched. He wanted to look away, to deny what he was seeing, but he forced himself to watch. He needed to know the truth, no matter how painful. The video cut off as the pair disappeared into a room, but the damage was done. Stanley's world, once so certain, lay shattered at his feet. Taking a deep breath, Stanley steeled himself. He needed to be strong for Zachary. "Son, listen to me," he said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "I want you to come home immediately. Can you do that?" "Why, yes, Dad. I'm on my way." "Good. We'll deal with this together." "I love you, Zach." "Love you too, Dad." As the call ended, Stanley stepped out of the elevator. His mind raced, trying to formulate a plan. First things first, he needed to make sure his patients were taken care of. He dialed a familiar number. "Dr. Torres? It's Stanley. I hate to ask this, but I need you to cover my surgeries tomorrow. There's a family emergency." Dr. Edwin Torres, sensing the gravity in Stanley's voice, didn't hesitate. "Of course, Stanley. Is there anything else I can do? Just keep this between us for now, please. You have my word. Take care of yourself, my friend." As Stanley ended the call, he took a moment to collect himself. The betrayal cut deep, but he couldn't afford to fall apart. Not now. Zachary needed him to be strong. With determined steps, Stanley headed for the parking lot. The drive home would give him time to think, to plan. One thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. The tires of Stanley's Tesla screeched as he pulled into the driveway of his suburban home. The house, once a symbol of his family's happiness, now loomed before him like a mocking reminder of his shattered trust. Stanley rushed inside, finding Zachary pacing in the living room. The teenager's face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed from crying. As soon as he saw his father, Zachary broke down. "Dad," he choked out, "I'm so sorry. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but I couldn't let it go on. Stanley crossed the room in 3 long strides, enveloping his son in a tight embrace. You did the right thing, Zach. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. As Zachary's sobs subsided, Stanley guided him to the couch. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on them both. Finally, Stanley spoke. Zach, I need you to tell me everything. When did you first suspect something was wrong? Zachary took a shaky breath. It started a few weeks ago. Mom was always on her phone, smiling at messages but hiding the screen when I walked by. And Uncle Paul. He started coming over more often, always when you were at work. Stanley nodded, his jaw clenched tight. Go on. Today, I overheard Mom on the phone. She was laughing, talking about meeting someone. It didn't sound like she was talking to you. So I followed her when she left. You shouldn't have put yourself in danger like that, Stanley said. But there was no anger in his voice, only concern. Zachary shook his head. I had to know, Dad. I saw her car at the Starlight Motel, and then Uncle Paul showed up. They were all over each other, not even trying to hide it. I couldn't believe it. Stanley's heart ached for his son. Zachary was only 17, too young to be burdened with such a betrayal. I'm so sorry you had to see that, Zach. But I want you to know that we're going to get through this together. You and me. Zachary looked up at his father, his eyes filled with a mix of pain and admiration. How can you be so calm, Dad? I feel like I'm falling apart. Stanley managed a small smile. I'm not calm on the inside, believe me. But right now, you need me to be strong. And that's exactly what I'm going to be. As they talked into the night, Stanley listened as Zachary poured out his feelings of anger, confusion, and betrayal. He offered comfort and reassurance, all the while formulating a plan in his mind. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, Zachary fell into an exhausted sleep on the couch. Stanley covered him with a blanket, then retreated to his home office. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he'd hoped never to need. Jose, it's Stanley Huang. I need your help. It's time to initiate divorce proceedings. Jose Farley, known in legal circles for his ruthless efficiency in divorce cases, was instantly alert. I'm listening, Stanley. Tell me everything. As Stanley recounted the events of the night, Jose took notes, occasionally interrupting with sharp questions. When Stanley finished, there was a moment of silence on the line. I'm sorry you're going through this, Stanley, Jose said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. But I promise you, we're going to make sure you and Zachary come out of this as whole as possible. Sherry and Paul won't know what hit them. Stanley's grip on the phone tightened. Good. They deserve everything that's coming to them. As he ended the call, Stanley looked at a family photo on his desk. The smiling faces of Sherry and Paul now seemed like masks, hiding the ugliness beneath. With a swift motion, he knocked the frame face down. The betrayal cut deep, but Stanley Huang was not a man to be trifled with. As the sun rose on a new day, he steeled himself for the battle ahead. Sherry and Paul had made their choice. Now, they would face the consequences. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine lobby of First National Bank as Stanley strode through the doors, Jose Farley at his side. The click of their shoes on the marble floor echoed in the quiet space, a steady rhythm that matched Stanley's determined heartbeat. Mr. Huang, good morning. The bank manager, Mr. Thompson, greeted them with a puzzled smile. This is quite early for you. Is everything all right? Stanley's face was a mask of calm professionalism. Good morning, Mr. Thompson. I'm afraid this isn't a social call. I need to make some urgent changes to my accounts. Mr. Thompson's smile faltered slightly, sensing the tension in the air. Of course. Let's step into my office. Once seated, Stanley got straight to the point. I need to close all joint accounts I share with my wife, Sherry Huang. Immediately, Mr. Thompson's eyebrows shot up. Mr. Huang, this is quite a drastic step. He's sure. Jose interjected smoothly. And as Mr. Huang's legal counsel, I advise you to proceed without delay. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Mr. Thompson nodded. Very well. As the primary account holder, you have that right. What would you like done with the funds? Transfer everything to a new, secure account in my name only, Stanley instructed. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of pain. This was the first concrete step in dismantling the life he'd built with Sherry. As Mr. Thompson processed the paperwork, Stanley's mind wandered to the house he'd inherited from his parents. The home where he'd planned to grow old with Sherry, where they'd raised Zachary. Now, it felt tainted by betrayal. Jose, Stanley said quietly, after this, I want to put the house on the market. Jose nodded, making a note on his tablet. Consider it done. I know a realtor who can list it immediately. An hour later, they emerged from the bank, the financial ties between Stanley and Sherry severed. Without pausing, they headed straight to the offices of Elite Realty. Sarah Chun, a top-selling realtor and old friend of Jose's, met them at the door. Jose filled me in, she said, her expression sympathetic. I'm so sorry, Stanley, but I promise, we'll get your house sold quickly and for top dollar. As they went through the paperwork, Stanley felt a strange mix of emotions. The house held so many memories, both good and bad. But as he signed the listing agreement, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. This was a necessary step towards his new future. Meanwhile, across town, Zachary sat in the Baxter family's kitchen, pouring his heart out to his best friend, Kyle. Mrs. Baxter busied herself making breakfast, her heart aching for the young man she'd known since he was a child. I just can't believe it, Kyle, Zachary said, his voice hoarse from talking. My mom and my uncle. How could they do this to us? Kyle, usually quick with a joke, was uncharacteristically serious. It's messed up, man. But your dad's handling it like a boss. My dad says he's doing everything right. At that moment, Judge Baxter entered the kitchen. He placed a comforting hand on Zachary's shoulder. Your father is a good man, Zachary. He doesn't deserve this, and neither do you. But I want you to know that you have our full support. Whatever you and your father need, we're here. Zachary looked up at the judge, gratitude shining in his eyes. Thank you, sir. That means a lot. As the day progressed, Stanley delved deeper into the extent of the betrayal. A call from the family business's accountant revealed a disturbing pattern of missing funds from their charity accounts. The pieces began to fall into place. Jose, Stanley said, his voice tight with anger. I think Paul's been stealing from the charity. And Sherry. She must have been helping him access the information. Jose's sharp intake of breath was audible over the phone. This goes beyond a simple affair, Stanley. We're talking about serious financial crimes. We need to involve the authorities. Stanley closed his eyes, feeling the last shreds of his old life slipping away. Do it. They've made their choices. Now they'll face the consequences. As the sun began to set, Stanley returned home to find Zachary waiting for him. The house, usually warm and inviting, felt cold and empty. What happens now, Dad? Zachary asked, his voice small and uncertain. Stanley pulled his son into a tight embrace. Now, we stand strong. Together. Your mother and Uncle Paul have betrayed us in ways we're only beginning to understand. But we won't let them break us. We're going to build a new life, Zach. A better one. As father and son stood together in the fading light, the first act of their new life was drawing to a close. The revelation had shaken their world to its core, but from the ashes of betrayal, a stronger bond was forming. The road ahead would be challenging, but Stanley Huang was ready to face whatever came next, with his son by his side. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the living room of the Huang residence. Stanley and Zachary sat in tense silence, surrounded by hastily packed boxes. The air was thick with anticipation and barely contained anger. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the silence. Zachary stiffened, his hands clenching into fists. Stanley placed a steadying hand on his son's shoulder, his touch conveying strength and reassurance. The front door opened, and Sherry Huang stumbled in, looking disheveled and guilty. Her hair was mussed, her clothes wrinkled, and her makeup smeared. She froze in the doorway, her eyes widening as she took in the scene before her. What's going on? Sherry asked, her voice trembling. Stanley rose from his seat, his movements deliberate and controlled. Without a word, he crossed the room and handed Sherry a thick envelope. His eyes, once warm with love for her, were now cold and unyielding. Sherry fumbled with the envelope, her hands shaking as she pulled out the papers inside. As she read, the color drained from her face. "Divorce papers," she whispered, looking up at Stanley in disbelief. "You can't be serious." Stanley's voice was low and controlled, but the fury beneath was palpable. "I've never been more serious in my life, Sherry. Your affair with my brother ends now, as does our marriage." Sherry's demeanor changed in an instant. Her shock gave way to indignation as she tossed the papers aside. "Affair? What are you talking about? You're jumping to conclusions, Stanley. This is ridiculous." "Save it, Mom," Zachary interjected, his voice tight with anger. "I saw you at the Starlight Motel with Uncle Paul." Sherry's head whipped around to face her son, her eyes narrowing. "You followed me? How dare you?" "How dare I?" Zachary shot back, rising to his feet. "How dare you cheat on Dad? How dare you betray our family?" Sherry's facade crumbled, replaced by a mixture of desperation and resentment. "You don't understand," she pleaded, turning back to Stanley. "Our marriage has been falling apart for years. You're always at the hospital, always putting your patients first. When was the last time you put me first, Stanley?" Stanley's expression remained impassive. "So your solution was to sleep with my brother? To betray not just me, but our son as well?" "I didn't mean for it to happen," Sherry said, her voice rising. "Paul was there for me when you weren't. He listened, he cared. Enough." Stanley's sharp command cut through Sherry's excuses. "I don't want to hear it. You made your choice, Sherry. Now you have to live with the consequences." Sherry's pleading expression morphed into one of fury. She rounded on Zachary, her eyes flashing with anger. "This is your fault. You little spy, always poking your nose where it doesn't belong. You've ruined everything." Zachary recoiled as if slapped, shock and hurt written across his face. Stanley stepped between them, his presence a protective barrier. "That's enough, Sherry," Stanley said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You don't get to blame our son for your mistakes. You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave. Anything you leave behind will be donated." Sherry's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. She looked from Stanley to Zachary, searching for any sign of sympathy or weakness. Finding none, her shoulders slumped in defeat. "Fine," she spat, her voice bitter. "You'll regret this, Stanley. Both of you will." As Sherry stormed upstairs, the sound of her angry footsteps echoing through the house, Stanley turned to Zachary. He pulled his son into a tight embrace, feeling the teenager's body shake with suppressed sobs. "You did good, Zach," Stanley murmured, his voice filled with pride. "I know how hard that was, standing up to her like that. I'm so proud of you." Zachary clung to his father, drawing strength from his unwavering support. "I can't believe she tried to blame us," he said, his voice muffled against Stanley's shirt. "People like your mother and Paul, they can't accept responsibility for their actions," Stanley explained, gently pulling back to look Zachary in the eye. "But that's their problem, not ours. We know the truth, and we'll get through this together." As they heard Sherry moving around upstairs, Stanley guided Zachary to the couch. They sat side by side, a united front against the storm that was about to break. An hour later, Sherry descended the stairs, dragging a large suitcase behind her. Her face was a mask of cold fury as she surveyed the living room one last time. "This isn't over, Stanley," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You'll hear from my lawyer." Stanley met her gaze steadily. "I look forward to it. Goodbye, Sherry." The door slammed behind her, the sound echoing through the suddenly empty-feeling house. Stanley and Zachary sat in silence for a long moment, the reality of their new situation settling over them. Finally, Stanley squeezed Zachary's shoulder. "It's just you and me now, son. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but we'll face it together." Zachary nodded, a small, determined smile forming on his face. "Together, Dad. Always." As the sun set outside, casting the room in shadows, father and son began the process of rebuilding their lives, stronger and more united than ever before. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil within the Huang household. Stanley and Zachary were in the kitchen, half-heartedly attempting to eat breakfast, when a frantic knocking at the front door startled them. Stanley opened the door to find Whitney, Paul's wife, standing on the porch. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, her normally immaculate appearance disheveled. "Stanley," she gasped, her voice raw with emotion. "Please, I need to talk to you." "Is it true? About Paul and Sherry?" Stanley's expression softened slightly at the sight of Whitney's distress. He stepped aside, allowing her to enter. "Come in, Whitney. I think you should sit down." As they entered the living room, Zachary quietly excused himself, sensing the need for privacy. Whitney sank onto the couch, her body trembling. "I've been trying to reach Paul all night," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "He's not answering his phone, and when I went to his office, his secretary said he hadn't come in. Then I started hearing rumors, horrible rumors about him and Sherry. Please, Stanley, tell me it's not true." Stanley took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he had to do. "Whitney, I'm so sorry, but it is true. We have evidence of their affair." Whitney's face crumpled, a keening sound escaping her lips. No, it can't be. Paul wouldn't. He couldn't." With a heavy heart, Stanley retrieved his phone and pulled up the video Zachary had sent him. "I wish I didn't have to show you this, but you deserve to know the truth." He handed Whitney the phone, watching as she pressed play with shaking hands. As the damning footage played out, Whitney's expression shifted from disbelief to horror to utter devastation. "Oh God," she whispered, the phone slipping from her grasp. "How could they do this to us?" Stanley caught the phone before it hit the floor, setting it aside. Despite his own pain, he found himself moving to sit beside Whitney, offering what comfort he could to a fellow victim of betrayal. "I wish I had an answer for you," he said softly. "But the truth is, people like Paul and Sherry, they're selfish. They don't think about the pain they cause others." Whitney turned to Stanley, her eyes swimming with tears. "How are you so calm? I feel like I'm falling apart." A grim smile touched Stanley's lips. "Trust me, I'm far from calm on the inside. But I have to stay strong for Zachary. And right now, I think you need someone to be strong for you too." Whitney broke down then, years of love and trust crumbling in the face of her husband's betrayal. Stanley sat with her, offering silent support as she wept. As Whitney's sobs subsided, Stanley's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening as he saw Paul's name. "It's Paul," he told Whitney. "Do you want me to answer it?" Whitney nodded, wiping at her eyes. "Put it on speaker. I want to hear what he has to say." Stanley accepted the call, his voice cold as he spoke. "Paul." "Stanley, thank God." Paul's voice came through, a mixture of relief and anxiety. "Look, I know you're probably angry, but we need to talk. This is all just a big misunderstanding." "Save it, Paul." Stanley cut him off. "There's no misunderstanding. I've seen the video. Whitney's seen it too." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. When Paul spoke again, his tone had changed, becoming wheedling and desperate. "Come on, bro. We can work this out. It was a mistake, okay? A moment of weakness. You can't throw away years of family over one little slip-up." Stanley's grip on the phone tightened, his knuckles turning white. "One little slip-up? Is that what you call stealing from our family's charity? Using my wife to access confidential information?" Paul's sharp intake of breath was audible. "How did you look?" "Stanley, I can explain. I was in a tight spot. I needed the money. But I was going to pay it back, I swear." "Save your excuses," Stanley said, his voice filled with disgust. "I've already reported you to the medical board for your unethical behavior. The police have been notified about the embezzlement. You're done, Paul. You can't do this." Paul's voice rose, panic evident in his tone. "I'm your brother. Family sticks together, no matter what." Stanley's laugh was devoid of humor. "Family? You lost the right to call yourself family the moment you betrayed us. Goodbye, Paul. I hope it was worth it." He ended the call, the silence in its wake deafening. Whitney stared at the phone, then at Stanley, a mix of emotions playing across her face. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "for telling me the truth. For being here." Stanley nodded, feeling a strange kinship with this woman who had been thrust into the same nightmare as him. "We didn't ask for this, Whitney, but we don't have to face it alone." As Whitney left, looking shaken but somehow stronger, Stanley felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be difficult, but he was determined to emerge from this betrayal not as a victim, but as a survivor. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity and emotion for Stanley and Zachary. As news of the scandal spread, they found themselves at the center of a storm of gossip and speculation. At the hospital, Stanley could feel the weight of curious stares and hushed conversations that fell silent as he approached. The whispers followed him down corridors and into operating rooms, threatening to undermine the reputation he'd spent years building. One morning, as Stanley scrubbed in for surgery, he overheard two nurses talking in low voices. "Can you believe it? Dr. Huang's wife and his own brother? I heard he knew about it all along." Turned a blind eye for years, Stanley's hands stilled under the running water. For a moment, he felt a surge of anger and despair. Then, taking a deep breath, he squared his shoulders and pushed through the doors into the operating room. "Good morning, everyone," he said, his voice steady and professional. "We have a complex procedure ahead of us. Let's focus on giving this child the best possible care." As the hours ticked by, Stanley lost himself in the intricate dance of surgery. His hands moved with precision and skill, his mind razor-sharp as he navigated the challenges of a high-risk operation. When he finally emerged from the OR, exhausted but triumphant, he found Dr. Edwin Torres waiting for him. "Stellar work in there, Stanley," Torres said, his voice warm with admiration. "I heard it was touch and go for a while." Stanley nodded, allowing himself a small smile. "It was challenging, but the team pulled together beautifully. That child has a real chance now." Torres's expression grew serious. "Listen, Stanley, I wanted to talk to you about something. I've been hearing some unsavory rumors floating around." Stanley tensed, bracing himself for more judgment or pity. But Torres surprised him. "I want you to know that I've got your back," Torres continued. "What happened in your personal life doesn't change the fact that you're one of the best damn surgeons I've ever worked with. Anyone who says otherwise can answer to me." Emotion welled up in Stanley's throat, threatening to overwhelm him. He swallowed hard, managing a nod of gratitude. Word of Stanley's successful surgery spread quickly through the hospital, countering the tide of gossip. Over the next few weeks, he threw himself into his work with renewed dedication, taking on the most challenging cases and achieving remarkable results. His colleagues, impressed by his unwavering professionalism in the face of personal turmoil, began to rally around him. The whispers of scandal were replaced by murmurs of respect and admiration. At home, Zachary was facing his own challenges. The first day back at school after the news broke was a gauntlet of stares and whispered comments. But rather than shrinking from the attention, Zachary held his head high, channeling his father's strength. In his English class, the teacher, Mrs. Patel, pulled him aside after the bell rang. "Zachary, I just wanted to check in with you. If you need someone to talk to, my door is always open." Zachary offered her a small smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Patel. It's been tough, but my dad and I are getting through it together." Mrs. Patel nodded, her eyes warm with understanding. "You know, we're starting a peer counseling program. Given what you've been through, I think you'd have a lot to offer. Would you be interested in taking a leadership role?" Zachary hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, I think I would. Maybe I can help other kids who are going through family stuff." As the weeks passed, Zachary threw himself into his studies and the peer counseling program with renewed determination. His grades, already good, improved even further. He found a sense of purpose in helping other students navigate their own family troubles, drawing on his experiences to offer support and understanding. One evening, as Stanley and Zachary sat at the dinner table, Zachary shared some news. "Dad, I got my calc test back today. I aced it." Stanley's face lit up with pride. "That's fantastic, Zach. I know you've been working hard." Zachary nodded, a determined gleam in his eye. "Yeah, I have. And you know what? I've been thinking. I want to be a doctor, like you. I want to help people, make a difference. Stanley reached across the table, squeezing his son's hand. You already make a difference, Zach. Every day. And if becoming a doctor is what you want, I'll support you every step of the way. As they cleared the table together, Stanley marveled at his son's resilience. The betrayal that could have broken them had instead forged them into something stronger. They were survivors, the two of them, facing the world with courage and determination. The road ahead would not be easy, but Stanley knew that together they could face anything. The aftermath of betrayal had revealed not just the depth of their pain, but the height of their strength. And in that strength, they would find their way forward, step by step, day by day. 3 months had passed since the explosive revelations that had torn the Huang family apart. The crisp autumn air carried with it the promise of new beginnings as Stanley and Zachary stood before their new home in a different city. Well, this is it, Stanley said, his voice tinged with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Our fresh start, Zachary nodded, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar street. It feels weird, Dad, but good weird, you know? Stanley squeezed his son's shoulder. I know exactly what you mean. Their new house was smaller than their old one, but it felt right. No ghosts of betrayal lurked in these corners, no painful memories waited to ambush them. This was truly their new beginning. As they unpacked, Stanley's phone buzzed with a notification. He glanced at it, his jaw tightening. Another message from Sherry. He deleted it without reading, just as he had done with all the others over the past 3 months. Mom again? Zachary asked, noticing his father's expression. Stanley nodded. And Paul too. They've been trying to reach us both. Zachary's face hardened. Have you read any of their messages? No, Stanley replied firmly. And I don't intend to. They made their choices, Zach. We're making ours. As they settled into their new routine, Stanley threw himself into his new role as head of pediatric surgery at Eastside Memorial Hospital. The position was challenging, pushing him to his limits, but he thrived under the pressure. One morning, as Stanley was reviewing patient files in his new office, there was a knock at the door. Come in, he called out. A tall, distinguished-looking man entered, a warm smile on his face. Dr. Huang, I'm Dr. Marcus Chen, Chief of Surgery. I just wanted to welcome you personally and see how you're settling in. Stanley stood, shaking Dr. Chen's hand. Thank you, Dr. Chen. I appreciate the warm welcome. Everyone's been incredibly supportive. Dr. Chen nodded, his expression turning serious. I'll be frank with you, Dr. Huang. When your name came up for this position, there were some concerns given the publicity surrounding your personal life. Stanley tensed, preparing for the worst. However, Dr. Chen continued, your reputation as a surgeon is impeccable. The board was impressed by how you handled yourself professionally during that difficult time. We believe you're exactly what this department needs. Relief washed over Stanley. Thank you, Dr. Chen. I promise you won't regret giving me this opportunity. As Dr. Chen left, Stanley sat back in his chair, a sense of validation washing over him. He had weathered the storm and come out stronger for it. Meanwhile, Zachary was adapting to his new high school. The absence of whispers and pitying looks was a welcome change. Here, he was just Zachary Huang, the new kid, not the son of the cheating wife and embezzling uncle. During lunch one day, Zachary overheard a group of students discussing the school's peer counseling program. Hey, he said, approaching their table. I couldn't help overhearing. I was involved in a program like that at my old school. Is there any way I could get involved here? The students looked at him with interest. Really? One girl asked. We're always looking for new volunteers, especially ones with experience. I'm Emma, by the way. I run the program. As Zachary shared his experiences, careful to keep the details of his own family drama vague, he felt a sense of purpose. He could use what he'd been through to help others. It was a small victory, but a significant one. That evening, as Stanley and Zachary shared dinner in their new kitchen, Stanley's phone rang. The caller ID showed a name he hadn't expected to see. Whitney. Whitney, he answered, surprise evident in his voice. Is everything all right? Whitney's voice came through, strong and clear. Everything's fine, Stanley. Better than fine. Actually, I I wanted to thank you. Thank me? Stanley asked, puzzled. For your honesty that day. For showing me the truth about Paul, no matter how painful it was. I've divorced him, Stanley. I'm free. Stanley felt a weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying lift from his shoulders. I'm glad, Whitney. You deserve better. We both do, Whitney replied. I just wanted you to know that your kindness during the worst moment of my life, it meant everything. I hope you and Zachary are doing well. As they talked, Stanley found himself smiling. Here was someone who understood exactly what he'd been through. Their conversation flowed easily, two survivors sharing their experiences and hopes for the future. After hanging up, Stanley turned to Zachary, who had been watching curiously. That was Whitney, he explained. Paul's ex-wife now. She's doing well. Zachary nodded thoughtfully. It's good that she got away from Uncle Paul too. Do you think we'll ever hear from Mom and Uncle Paul again? Stanley sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'm sure we will, Zach. But right now, they've lost everything. Their jobs, their homes, their friends. They're facing the consequences of their actions. But that's not our problem anymore. We're focused on our future, remember? Zachary smiled, a determined glint in his eye. Right. Our future. Speaking of which, I've got a ton of bio homework to do if I want to keep my grades up for pre-med. As Zachary headed to his room, Stanley watched him go with pride. They had been through hell, but they were emerging stronger, more resilient. This new city, this new life, it was their chance to rewrite their story. And Stanley was determined to make it a good one. 6 months into their new life, Stanley found himself facing one of the most challenging cases of his career. 8-year-old Lily Chun had been admitted with a rare and complex heart condition that had stumped several other surgeons. As Stanley studied Lily's scans, his brow furrowed in concentration, Dr. Marcus Chun entered the room. Any progress, Dr. Huang? Chin asked, his voice grave. Stanley nodded slowly. I think I might have an idea, but it's risky. Very risky. He outlined his innovative approach, a procedure that combined techniques from several different specialties. It was daring, unprecedented even, but Stanley believed it was Lily's best chance. Dr. Chen listened intently, his expression a mixture of concern and admiration. It's never been done before, Stanley. The board will need some convincing. Then I'll convince them, Stanley replied, his jaw set with determination. This little girl deserves a chance at life, and I believe I can give it to her. The next day, Stanley stood before the hospital board, presenting his plan with unwavering confidence. As he finished, he looked each board member in the eye. I know this is unorthodox, he said, but sometimes, to save a life, we need to think outside the box. I stake my reputation on this procedure. I believe it will work. After what felt like an eternity, the board gave their approval. As Stanley left the meeting room, Dr. Chan clapped him on the shoulder. Impressive, Dr. Huang. Now, let's save that little girl's life. The day of the surgery arrived. As Stanley scrubbed in, he felt a familiar mix of adrenaline and focus. This was where he belonged, where he could make a real difference. The procedure was grueling, lasting over 12 hours. Every movement had to be precise, every decision critical. But as Stanley worked, he felt a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced since before the scandal. Here, in the operating room, nothing existed but the patient and the intricate dance of saving a life. Finally, as the last suture was placed, Stanley stepped back. Let's take her off bypass, he said, his voice hoarse from hours of concentration. The room held its breath as they waited. Then, the steady beep of the heart monitor filled the air. Lily's heart was beating on its own, strong and steady. A cheer went up from the surgical team. Stanley allowed himself a small smile behind his mask. He had done it. Lily would live. As news of the successful surgery spread through the hospital, Stanley found himself the center of attention once again. But this time, it was for all the right reasons. Colleagues he barely knew stopped him in the hallways to congratulate him. Nurses smiled at him with newfound respect. That evening, as Stanley recounted the surgery to an awestruck Zachary over dinner, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. This was who he was meant to be, not a victim of betrayal, but a healer, a savior of lives. That's amazing, Dad, Zachary said, his eyes shining with admiration. You know, hearing you talk about your surgeries, it makes me even more certain about becoming a doctor. Stanley felt a surge of pride. You'll make a fantastic doctor, Zach. You've got the brains, the dedication, and most importantly, the heart for it. As they cleared the dinner table together, Zachary hesitated, then spoke. Hey, Dad, I was thinking, maybe we could volunteer at that shelter for abuse victims we heard about? You know, give back a little? Stanley looked at his son, marveling at the young man he was becoming. That's a great idea, Zach. I think it would be good for both of us. The following weekend found them at the New Beginnings shelter, sorting through donations and helping to organize the storage room. As they worked, Stanley couldn't help but reflect on their own journey. They had been victims once, but now they were survivors, strong enough to help others find their way out of the darkness. One of the shelter coordinators, a kind-faced woman named Maria, approached them as they worked. I just wanted to thank you both for volunteering, she said. It means so much to our residents to see that there are good men out there, men who care. Stanley and Zachary exchanged a look, a silent understanding passing between them. They had come here to help others, but in doing so, they were also helping themselves heal. As they drove home that evening, Zachary turned to his father. You know, Dad, I'm really proud of us. Look at how far we've come. Stanley nodded, a lump forming in his throat. Me too, Zach. Me too. 2 years had passed since the scandal that had upended their lives. Stanley and Zachary had settled into their new reality, their bond stronger than ever. The pain of betrayal had faded, replaced by a deep appreciation for the life they had built together. It was a crisp Saturday morning when Stanley's phone rang. The caller ID displayed a name he hadn't seen in months, Jose Farley. Jose, Stanley answered, a note of surprise in his voice. It's been a while. It has, Jose replied, his tone serious. Stanley, I've got some news. Sherry and Paul have been arrested. Stanley felt a jolt of shock. Arrested? For what? Fraud and theft, Jose explained. Apparently, they didn't stop at just your family's charity. They've been running a scheme for years. They're facing significant jail time. Stanley listened in stunned silence as Jose laid out the details. Sherry and Paul, desperate and cornered, had turned to increasingly risky criminal activities. Now, they were reaping the consequences of their actions. They're looking to make a deal, Stanley, Jose continued. They've been trying to contact you. I think they're hoping you'll speak on their behalf, maybe reduce their sentences. Stanley's jaw clenched. Even now, after everything, they were still trying to use him. What do you think I should do, Jose? Legally? You're under no obligation to get involved. Personally, I think you've given them enough of your time and energy. You've moved on, Stanley. You've built a new life. Don't let them drag you back into their mess. As Stanley ended the call, he felt a strange mix of emotions. There was anger, certainly, at Sherry and Paul's continued selfishness, but mostly, he felt a profound sense of detachment. Their actions, their fates, no longer had the power to affect him. Zachary found him sitting on the back porch, staring thoughtfully into the distance. Everything okay, Dad? Stanley patted the seat next to him, and Zachary sat down. Slowly, he recounted Jose's call and the news about Sherry and Paul. Zachary listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When Stanley finished, Zachary asked, Are you going to help them? Stanley shook his head. No. They made their choices, Zach. Now they have to live with the consequences. Our life is here now, with the people who truly care about us. Zachary nodded, relief evident in his eyes. I'm glad. They don't deserve your help, Dad. Not after everything they did. As they sat together, the sound of a car pulling up broke the silence. It was Whitney, arriving with Kyle and his parents for their planned dinner. The Baxters had become a constant in their new life, providing friendship and support. And Whitney, who had moved to the same city for a fresh start of her own, had become a close friend to both Stanley and Zachary. As they all gathered around the dinner table, Stanley looked at the faces surrounding him. Here was Kyle, Zachary's steadfast friend who had stood by him through the worst of times. Here were Judge Baxter and his wife, who had offered wisdom and support when Stanley needed it most. And here was Whitney, another survivor who had found the strength to rebuild her life. Whitney raised her glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," she said, her eyes meeting Stanley's. "To new beginnings, and to the family we choose." As glasses clinked and conversation flowed, Stanley felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. The betrayal that had once threatened to destroy them had instead made them stronger. They had emerged from the darkness, not just surviving, but thriving. Later that evening, as their guests were leaving, Zachary approached Stanley with a grin. "Hey, Dad, I was thinking, we've both got some time off coming up. How about a camping trip? Just you and me?" Stanley felt his heart swell with affection. "That sounds perfect, Zach. Let's do it." As they began to plan their trip, their laughter echoing through their home, Stanley realized that they had achieved something remarkable. They had taken the shattered pieces of their old life and built something new, something beautiful. This home, this life, was built on a foundation of trust, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between a father and his son. As Stanley looked at Zachary, he knew with absolute certainty that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. They were survivors, they were fighters, and above all, they were family. The betrayal at Starlight Motel had been the darkest chapter of their lives, but it had also been the catalyst for this new beginning. And as Stanley Huang looked to the future, he felt nothing but gratitude for the life they had built and the strength they had found within themselves. Epilogue. 5 years had passed since the fateful day at the Starlight Motel that had changed the Huang family forever. The dust had long settled, but the ripples of that betrayal continued to shape the lives of all involved. Stanley Huang, now 52, had become a leading figure in pediatric cardiology. His groundbreaking surgery on Lily Chun had opened doors to new research and innovative techniques. He was regularly invited to speak at international conferences, sharing his expertise with colleagues from around the world. Despite his professional success, Stanley never lost sight of what truly mattered. He and Zachary maintained their tradition of annual camping trips, cherishing the bond that had only grown stronger through adversity. Zachary, at 22, was in his final year of pre-med at Johns Hopkins University. His experiences had shaped him into a compassionate and driven young man. He continued to volunteer at shelters for abuse victims, using his own story to inspire hope in others. His dedication to his studies and extracurricular activities made him a top candidate for medical schools across the country. Whitney, now 48, had found her calling as a counselor for victims of financial abuse. Her personal experience with Paul's betrayal had given her unique insight into the emotional toll of such deceit. She and Stanley remained close friends, their shared history creating a bond of understanding and mutual respect. They often collaborated on charity events, raising awareness about domestic abuse and financial fraud. Kyle Baxter, Zachary's steadfast friend, was pursuing a law degree, inspired by his father's role in supporting the Huangs during their darkest times. He and Zachary remained as close as brothers, despite attending different universities. Judge Baxter and his wife had become surrogate parents to both Stanley and Zachary. Their home was a frequent gathering place for holiday celebrations and casual Sunday dinners. The judge, now semi-retired, often sought Stanley's advice on cases involving medical malpractice, bridging their professional worlds. Dr. Edwin Torres had retired from surgical practice but continued to mentor young doctors at the hospital where he and Stanley had worked. He took great pride in Stanley's accomplishments, often boasting to anyone who would listen about how he had recognized Stanley's potential early on. As for Sherry and Paul, their fate had taken a drastically different turn. Both had been convicted of multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. The investigation triggered by Stanley's initial report had uncovered a web of financial crimes spanning several years. Sherry, now 49, was serving a 15-year sentence in a federal penitentiary. The once proud woman who had betrayed her family for excitement and greed was a shell of her former self. Her attempts to contact Stanley and Zachary had long since ceased, her letters returned unopened. In the harsh reality of prison life, she had ample time to reflect on the choices that had cost her everything: her family, her freedom, and her future. Paul, 54, had received a harsher sentence due to his role as the mastermind behind their schemes. Sentenced to 25 years, he found himself in a maximum security facility, his medical license permanently revoked. The charismatic man who had once charmed his way through life now spent his days in isolation, shunned even by his fellow inmates for betraying his own family. Their fall from grace had been spectacular and public. The story of the respected surgeon and his embezzling wife and brother had made national headlines, serving as a cautionary tale about the consequences of betrayal and greed. Former friends and colleagues distanced themselves, leaving Sherry and Paul to face their punishment alone. The charity that Paul and Sherry had stolen from had managed to recover, thanks in large part to Stanley's efforts. He had made anonymous donations to help keep its programs running, unable to stand by and watch innocent people suffer for his brother's crimes. The organization had since implemented stricter financial controls and was thriving, helping more families than ever before. As for the Starlight Motel, the site of the fateful revelation, it had been demolished 2 years after the scandal. In its place stood a community center, funded in part by a donation from Stanley. The center offered support groups for victims of infidelity and financial abuse, turning a place of betrayal into one of healing and hope. On a warm summer evening, Stanley stood on the porch of his home, watching the sunset. He held a letter in his hand, Zachary's acceptance to medical school. Pride swelled in his chest as he thought about how far they had come. The sound of laughter drifted from inside the house, where Zachary was celebrating with Kyle, Whitney, and the Baxters. Stanley smiled, grateful for the family they had chosen, the bonds forged in the fire of adversity. As he joined the celebration inside, Stanley reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The betrayal that had once threatened to destroy them had instead been the catalyst for a new, richer life. They had not just survived, they had thrived. In the end, Stanley realized, their story was not one of betrayal, but of resilience. It was a testament to the strength of the human spirit, the power of integrity, and the enduring bond between a father and son who had faced the worst together and emerged stronger for it. As laughter filled the room and glasses clinked in celebration, Stanley knew that this moment, these people, this life, was the true happy ending they had fought so hard to achieve. And it was sweeter than anything he could have imagined on that fateful night at the Starlight Motel, all those years ago.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.